We are in the Pickens Canyon watershed below the Sierra Madre Mountains here after the station fire. Now, it's been some months since the station fire, and of course the watershed was burned bare up above us. The loss of the watershed plus two rainstorms, 3.27 and 4.2 inches, only a week apart, came down through this canyon. The two forks of Pickens Canyon plus the Malali Canyon, which all drain out of that watershed down this canyon. You can see the power of the water minus the watershed to hold it back. We can observe this alder tree has been uprooted and hurled into the bank. Before it was knocked over, the trunk was pounded with the rocks and boulders rolling down the canyon, stripping the bark off the trunk, finally undermined and uprooted, floated and spiked into the hillside. On this trunk, we can see the tree is still standing, but about 10 feet up the trunk, you can see where the bark has been hammered right off the side of the tree facing up canyon and even pounded into the structural wood. The bark has been removed more than 2/3 of the way around the circumference of the trunk, where material rushed by with this powerful storm, rolling and swirling all the rocks and gravel and boulders. We can't expect this tree to survive, even though the tip is still green and there's bark above me up the trunk. If this were in an urban yard, the tree would have to be removed for safety to prevent the surprise failure and collapse of the tree. This is not debris that was washed down and deposited here. This was actually a whole tree right here. This was a tree in front of another tree, and it took the brunt of the force of the rolling and tumbling boulders. This trunk was pounded to splinters and somewhat protected the tree behind it, but it wasn't enough to preserve it permanently because the injury is very severe. It lost at least 50% of its bark for about 8 or 10 feet up the trunk. So even with this trunk in front of this tree, it wasn't enough to protect this tree from fatal injury. Many things to observe on this tree. One of the things that we see is an old ivy stalk at the base here. Maybe the ivy even protected the trunk from losing very much bark, because this tree still has its bark intact. It's bruised and it's scuffed, but the bark is still intact on this trunk. This is very close to original grade for the tree. You can see the flare. And so this is where the tree's original root crown height was before the flood. So this trunk is actually buried on the back side, about 7 feet deep in debris. The scene speaks for itself. It's a scene of violence and destruction. This was a very well-developed ecosystem, the bottom of this canyon. If the fire could have been prevented, all this damage and destruction could have been prevented as well.